Well, you've got a shape, you've determined its size, you've figured out how thick your walls are going to be. Now it's time to actually start cutting wood. And here we have the big bugaboo in segmented turning, and that's the miter angle that you have to cut to. I use 12-sided rings. That means the miter angle is 15 degrees. 15 degrees on each side of the segment totals 30 degrees. 12 segments times 30 degrees is 360 degrees. So that all works. Now how do we get that miter angle established? A couple of different ways. I've got here a bevel miter gauge. I've set it at 75 degrees. That's 15 degrees off of 90. And so I can put that up against my fence, slide it up against the saw blade, and make sure that it contacts through the entire extent of that leg. In this case it does. That's reasonably accurate. Another way to get the same result is to look at the distance between where the extension of your fence crosses the top edge of the board. Take that distance to the corner, take the corner down to the miter fence. You've got a right triangle, 15 degrees is the angle, and the ratio between the short side and the long side is the tangent of the angle, which in this case is 0.267949 blah 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 blah. My table is 31 7/8 inches from the corner to where the line crosses up here at the top right corner, and 8 19/32 down here. Well, if I take the 31 7/8 times the 0.2679, I end up with 8.05 inches is what the measurement should be here. And the 8 19/32 is 8.059. So I'm a little bit high. And we can verify that agrees with reality by taking a look at the ring I cut yesterday. You notice there's a little bit of a gap on the inside edge there. That means the miter angle is a little bit large, and that's exactly what we show with 8059 versus 8054. But that's a pretty small error, and that's on the order of a 64th of an inch there. So we'd be able to flatten these two halves by taking basically about a 64th of an inch off one side or the other and make it flat. You'd be hard pressed to locate that in the project without a ruler. Now right after that I cut this ring. It's not quite as deep or quite as wide on the meat, and there's no gaps there at all. So you never know exactly what you're going to get, even though if you've got your setup exact. Now by the time you've gotten here, you should have a plan for what you're going to do. For each layer you know what the diameter is, and from that you know what the size of the segments are, and of course we already know it's 15 degrees for the miter angle. Well, here's all the math you'll ever need to figure things out. Of course I would hope you would use my program to do the job, but if you want to do it by hand, that's okay too. If you take pi times the diameter, that gives you the circumference of the ring. Divide by the number of sides, that'll give you the length of the edge of your segments. Now that's an approximation because we're doing a circle and not straight lines. The real answer is the diameter times the tangent of the miter angle. And how much is that off? It's surprising how good it is actually. At 8 sides, it's off by 5%. It's low by 5%. At 12 sides, it's 2.6 or 2.7%. At 16 sides, it's 1.9%. And at 20 sides, it's about 0.6%. So it's a surprisingly good result, and it just means that your whole project will be just a little bit smaller than you planned it to be. But you could add that extra 5% to all of your measurements and make it bang on. when you cut the segments, well, this particular one needs to be 2 and 5/32, and that you want that to be a pretty decent measurement. So I set the index on the tooth that I want to measure from. That's one of the teeth that slants this way. So that's going to be a principal determiner of what the width is going to be, and then measure off the size that I need to make the ring, put a stop in there and clamp it on. Nice thing about the miter fence instead of an Incra or a Dubby is that when you've got your piece of stock in here to be cut, you're protecting the area at the bottom of the cut so that no sawdust gets in that spot. You don't have to worry about keep cleaning it out so that you'll always get a good seat on your piece. Also, you don't have a terribly smooth surface here or here, and that means that it's easy to hold the piece of stock against the fence and hold it down and make your cut without it moving on you. That's one of the problems with one of these other methods. And if you're going to use one of those methods, you need to put some sandpaper on the fence side so that your piece of wood has something to cling to, so to speak, so that it doesn't move while you make the cuts. Now when you get smaller segments, your fingers are going to be getting closer to the blade. My tolerance ends at about 1/2 to 9/16 of an inch. When it gets that small, then I use an awl or some other device like a screwdriver and apply pressure here. And I'm applying the pressure this way so that even if I do slip, it won't accidentally go into the blade. So I'm always pulling actually away from the saw. Another thing you can do is to mount a clamp to your fence. Fasten it down that way. Now your finger's not anywhere near the blade at all. When you're setting up the angle in the first place, I recommend that you cut some cheap wood at wide enough that it actually makes a disc rather than a ring or something close to it, because that's your worst possible case. Cut a full ring worth of segments, put them up in a rubber band, take a look at it in the light, see where the gaps are. If you've got a gap in the inside edge, your angle's too steep, you want to move it that way, make it shallower. If your gap is on the outside edge, your angle's not strong enough, you need to pull it down this way. And when I actually tuned this one, I was using sheets of paper as my width change to ease my way into the proper measurement. Use Baltic birch plywood to set up one of these things, and then you've got a good stable platform. It doesn't particularly move, or at least for one thing, it doesn't move differently here than here, because they're both the same kind of material. You will get expansion and traction overall, but of course you're measuring every time you use it. So there's nothing to do now but cut segments. Notice I cut 13 of them instead of 12. It's not a bad idea to have an extra one on hand, and we have a use for this when we start gluing segments into rings.